r/NoSleep. Posted by u/TroncdeNadal. My family purchased an old house. I found a gate to its dark past. We walked into our new home as the previous owners handed the keys to our mom and dad. Whoa, I can't wait to invite my friends to this place. It looks perfect for a game of hide and seek, exclaimed my older brother Paul. You can invite your friends, but you can forget about playing hide and seek. I don't want you running around carelessly and breaking anything. You know too well what happened with the washing machine at our old apartment. Our mom replied before Paul reluctantly nodded in obedience. Paul's initial reaction was certainly justified, as the house's sheer size was a heavy contrast to the rather small apartment we had previously called home. It wasn't a mansion, by any means, but you've probably already guessed it was still considerably larger than the type of residence we were familiar with. For my 9-year-old mind, it seemed like the largest house in all of Austria. My brother and I wasted no time making ourselves at home and familiarizing ourselves with each of the house's rooms. My new bedroom was twice as large as the one in our old apartment. I could now place all my dolls and plushies neatly on a spacious shelf instead of having them piled up inside a toy box in a corner. About a week after we had arrived at the house, Paul brought over his friends and they spent the entire afternoon playing video games in the living room. I also wanted to invite my friends, but our parents didn't want too many children inside the house at once and only let one of us invite their friends at any given time. Hey, Paul. You're being a bit too loud. I complained, as the noise Paul and his friends made while they yelled and laughed and played their video game at full volume was not letting me play with my dolls and plushies comfortably, not even in my own bedroom. This house is huge, Hannah. I'm sure you can find another room where you won't hear us. Paul replied, clearly not caring much about the discomfort he and his friends caused me with their loud games. I could have told our mom and dad about the situation, but I didn't want to begin an unnecessary dispute, so I did what Paul told me and went to search for another room where I could play without being bothered by the noise. I ended up settling in the house's attic, bringing my toys upstairs and setting up a make-believe tea party. Paul and I had already been to the attic the first day we arrived at the house, but had found it to be pretty uninteresting, being nothing more than a decently sized room mostly filled with old appliances from our apartment alongside a few things from the house's previous owners that they had left for us, such as some clothes as well as a large chest which I hadn't opened and didn't know what it contained. Hannah will be sorry for being a snitch. I heard Paul telling his friends downstairs. So, are we going to prank her? One of his friends replied, you bet we are. If my mom says I can't play with my video games for the rest of the weekend, then it's only fair for Hannah to not have her plushies, Paul exclaimed. It turned out our mom had ended up scolding him and his friends due to how loud they were, and he assumed I was the one who had told our mom about it so he could get scolded on purpose. But I had not. Anyhow, that didn't matter anymore, they were coming for my plushies and I had to react quickly. I planned to block the attic door with a large chest that was leaning against the wall. It was pretty heavy, so I only managed to move it a couple inches. It was then when I noticed that pushing away the chest had revealed a hole in the wall that had been hidden from sight up until that point. It was just the right size for an average child to be able to crawl through it, even a skinny adult could manage to do it. I had just enough time to grab all my dolls and plushies in a hurry and crawl inside the hole, sealing the entrance with the chest seconds before Paul and his friends reached the attic. Dumbfounded, they were unable to find me despite being sure they had heard me climbing the stairs and going there several minutes earlier. Paul and his friends weren't the only ones left in shock, however, as I couldn't believe my eyes once I discovered what awaited me at the other side of that hole in the wall, another room. A chamber just as big as the attic was hiding behind a wall, only visible and accessible via the hole I had just uncovered. Unlike the attic directly adjacent to it, this hidden room was completely empty, or it would have been if it hadn't been for the lone oval-shaped mirror that hung from one of its 4 walls. The mirror was about the size of an average adult. Its frame was dark green and was elaborately decorated with a floral motif simulating leaves. A single light bulb dangling from the ceiling dimly illuminated the chamber. It was already lit when I entered the room and appeared to be really old, but the mirror looked to be even older. I admit it took a little while for me to realize the mirror wasn't quite working how most people would expect it to work. The room reflected back at me did seem to be the same one I was located in, but the light bulb wasn't there, and neither was my own reflection. Just when I started to wonder if I was secretly a vampire all along, a young girl who looked to be around the same age as me crawled into the room reflected in the mirror. She carried a lantern in one hand and a doll in the other. She was wearing a long and flowy white dress and a voluminous skirt adorned with a pink ribbon. A pink bow adorned her head as well. She reminded me of the way my great-great-grandmother was dressed as a child in a really old photograph I had seen at my grandma's house. The mysterious girl and I both stared into the mirror in awe. Judging by her facial expression, I quickly guessed she was able to see me in the same way I was able to see her, and it was evident she had also come to the same conclusion in regards to me. After a few seconds of silence, I decided to break the ice. "Hello, who are you?" I asked. "Hello, my name's Frida. And who are you? Why are you behind this mirror?" She timidly replied after hesitating at first. "I'm Hannah. I've just found this secret room in my new house while trying to hide from my brother and his friends. They want to prank me and take all my plushies," I explained. "Really? I come to this room often ever since my father died a few months ago during the war against Prussia. My brother and I live with my stepmother now, and she's not very kind to us at all," Frida said. I had no idea of what war she was talking about, but I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Silently, we both took a step forward and stretched our hands, until they touched. It had become evident that the so-called mirror was actually a gateway. "Hannah. Paul. It's time for dinner," I heard my parents yell in the distance. "I have to go now, but we could meet again tomorrow, if you want to," I said to Frida. "I'd love to. I'll be here tomorrow morning after breakfast," she replied. Paul was forced by our parents to apologize to me for wanting to prank me. I accepted his apologies without thinking about it, since my mind was fixated on Frida. I've just had a chat with the neighbors. They're an elderly couple who have lived next to this house their whole lives, and you won't believe the story they've told me. They said that long ago, in the mid-19th century, there lived a widow with her 2 stepchildren in this house. She was a selfish woman who showed no love for the kids and was obsessed with the inheritance of her deceased husband. So when she checked her late husband's will and found out he had given everything to his children and had left almost nothing for her, she became overtaken by greed and rage and murdered her 2 stepchildren in cold blood. My dad explained as we ate dinner. We all shuddered upon hearing that story. Even if I didn't fully understand what inheritance and will meant, the thought of a deranged woman taking the lives of innocent children was enough to send shivers down my spine. I woke up the next day and ate my bowl of breakfast cereal in a rush, impatient to go to the hidden room and meet with Frida. I brought my plushies through the secret hole and let out a joyful smile once I saw her. "Good morning," Frida exclaimed. "Good morning. Do you want to see my plushies?" I replied. She nodded and advanced, crossing the mirror and stepping foot into my side of the room. We spent hours playing in our little secret chamber as we made up fictional scenarios and role-played with our toys. Frida only had her doll, which her mother had made for her just a couple months before dying of an illness. "You've got a lot of plushies," she pointed out. "Yeah, I guess I do. Do you want one? I can give it to you, if you want," I replied. "You really would? Thank you. I would like that one, please," Frida said as she picked up a bunny plushie and cradled it in her arms. We suddenly heard what sounded like intense shouting in the distance, seemingly coming from Frida's side of the mirror. Upon listening more carefully, I managed to identify the voices of a teenage boy and an adult woman screaming at each other. "Do you hear that?" I worryingly asked. "Yeah, it's nothing, this happens often. Don't worry, let's just keep playing," Frida uttered. It was a reply to what I had just said, but it almost sounded like she was also saying that to herself. The scream ceased after several minutes, accompanied by the sound of a door closing violently. "She's left the house. I don't know where she goes to, but she normally doesn't come back until late in the evening whenever she does that. I'm fine with it, though," Frida explained. "Well, it was fun, but I have to go with my parents and my brother now. We're going to eat in a restaurant today," I said as lunchtime drew nearer. "Oh, all right. Do you want to meet again this afternoon?" Frida asked. "Sure. And don't forget to take the bunny I've given you," I replied. "Right. See you soon, then," Frida said before grabbing her doll and her new bunny plushie, crossing the mirror into her side of the room and crawling away through the hole in the wall. "You look especially happy today, Hannah," my mom pointed out as we ate lunch at the restaurant. I had my mouth full, so I just smiled instead of replying with words. "She's been going to the attic, lately. I've seen her climbing the staircase with her toys and staying in there for hours on end," Paul explained. "I've made a new friend," I added after swallowing my food. "A friend? But all you've done this weekend is going to the attic. I suppose it's an imaginary friend, unless you're talking about a mouse or a cockroach," Paul sarcastically replied before letting out a chuckle. "It's none of your business," I proclaimed, ending the conversation. We arrived home at around 5 p.m. and I wasted no time rushing to the attic to reunite with Frida. I crawled through the hole and into the secret room and Frida wasn't there. "It's alright, I'll just have to wait a little while," I said to myself. And so, I waited, and waited, but Frida did not come. I stared at that magical mirror and into Frida's side of the room, fearing for her safety. After taking a deep breath, I took a step forward and crossed to the other side. What awaited me beyond the mirror was a house that had an identical layout to mine, but noticeable differences soon became apparent. All the modern furniture I had in my house was gone and vintage neo-Gothic furniture that was really popular from the mid-19th to the early 20th century had taken its place. There seemed to be no electricity nor any sort of appliances or devices that depended on it either. "Hannah." I heard a familiar voice whispering from inside a nearby room, which I later identified as the equivalent to my bedroom. But in that version of the house, it appeared to be Frida's bedroom. "Frida. What happened?" I asked as I noticed she was trembling in fear and tears were running down her face. "My stepmother came home a few minutes ago, and she was really mad. My brother told me to go hide in my bedroom and then I heard screams," Frida uttered in between sobs. "But I thought you were used to those screams," I replied. "Not to that kind of screams. It sounded like my brother was in pain, and I also heard objects falling and breaking and then, everything stopped," Frida explained, breaking into tears as I tried to comfort her. "It's okay, we'll go see what happened together. I'll be right next to you," I said before Frida and I stepped out of the bedroom holding hands and slowly made our way to the living room. What we found there made my skin go pale. Blood. There was a pool of blood on the floor and pieces of furniture scattered all over the room, clearly indicating some kind of struggle had taken place. We heard noises coming from the garden. We peeked through a window and were horrified at the sight of Frida's stepmother digging a deep hole in the ground with a shovel, with a large bag about the size of a person laying right next to her. Frida's stepmother turned to look at us with a stare that at first conveyed shock, but then morphed into a face of pure rage. We ran as fast as we could, climbing the staircase and locking ourselves inside the attic as Frida's stepmother drew closer. She violently knocked on the door. "Open the door," she angrily ordered, but Frida and I did not reply. "Come on Frida, this is just a misunderstanding. I promise I'll go buy you another doll if you open the door and let me talk to you. Yes, and it will be 1,000 times better than the cheap and old one you have," she uttered, suddenly changing her demeanor and speaking in a tone that made her sound like a warm and loving mother. Frida didn't answer and started crying even harder than before, clutching the doll her mother had made for her against her chest. "There are a few documents that your poor father wrote before he went to war and died, but he was wrong about some things he wrote. I want to correct them, but I need your help for that. In return, I can also buy you a beautiful dress made by a very talented dressmaker I know. You'll be as pretty as the Empress herself and all the girls in town will envy you. What do you say?" Frida's stepmother continued. "Blair. Go away," I yelled. A few seconds of silence followed. "Ugh, you idiot. If you had just stayed in your bedroom, I would have spared you. But it seems you leave me no other choice. Open up, you little piece of shit." The stepmother's friendly facade vanished as she yelled in anger and started banging on the door. Frida and I tried to hold the door with all our strength, but her stepmother wouldn't stop banging, hell-bent on knocking it open. "This won't do, let's go to the hidden room," I suggested. The door burst open a couple seconds later as Frida's stepmother charged towards us. I crawled through the hole in the wall first, but when it was Frida's turn, her stepmother grabbed her legs and dragged her out. I attempted to grab her hand and desperately pull her towards me, but I wasn't strong enough. "Hannah," Frida yelled in terror as she slipped away and was left at her stepmother's mercy. "Mommy. Daddy. Help," I shouted as I crossed the mirror into my version of the house and went downstairs. "Mom and Dad have gone shopping," Paul said as he ate snacks and watched a movie in the living room. I jumped into his arms as my face was soaked in tears. What are you doing? What's wrong?" he asked as I hugged him and refused to let go. "The attic, an evil woman, she took my friend," I struggled to utter. "What are you talking about?" Paul asked in confusion. I led him to the attic and showed him the hidden room. "Is that a mirror? What is it doing here?" Paul uttered as I stared at the mirror just as baffled as he was. It depicted our reflection, like a normal mirror would. I took a step forward and attempted to cross through it, but all I accomplished was bumping into glass. "Hey, kids. Look what I've found," my dad exclaimed a few days later, showing us an old key he had found in the attic. "I think it opens this chest." He explained as the large chest that blocked the entrance to the secret room opened, revealing all kinds of old objects. My brother and father started looking at the objects and commenting on them one by one. Wow! These must be over a century old. Maybe even from the 19th century. My father pointed out as he checked an old clock. My brother listened to him, but all I could focus on was a pair of toys covered in dust at the bottom of the chest, a doll and a bunny plushie.